morning, brothers of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. We're here at the international headquarters located at the birthplace of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, Washington, D.C. On this weekend, we observe and recognize the end of the current administration's first year in preparation of year two. I'm Brother Stevie Ballard, International Deputy Executive Director for Phi Beta Sigma, and I welcome you to this extra special interview with the Honorable Brother Micheal E. Cristal, International President. On this morning, Brother Cristal will share with you, our loyal Sigma brothers, the state of the fraternity as we elevate the theme of Brotherhood of conscious men actively serving our communities. The vision unfolds, celebrating year one. Good morning, Brother President, and welcome.
Good morning, Steve. How you doing?
Okay. Well, let's get right started.
All righty.
Now, think back. This is July of 2017. You have been sworn in as the 35th International President. So now, the fraternity has transitioned from one fraternity working together to transform our communities to a brotherhood of conscious men actively serving our communities. What was the impetus for the new theme, and how have you positioned the organization's focus with this theme in mind?
First of all, thanks to the brothers for tuning in this morning. Really excited about having the opportunity to visit with them and kind of celebrate what we've accomplished in a year, but recognizing certainly there's so much more for us to do. When I think about our theme, Steve, first I want to certainly congratulate the Honorable Past President Jonathan Mason for the excellent work he did on really creating that strong, solid, transformational foundation. We thought that was very important as we transitioned into the role. But what was most exciting for me when I really started championing the idea of running for president, we were really blessed to kind of share with the membership a theme. And we defined very clearly what our theme was. And when you think about the impetus, I love the way you package that. A brotherhood of conscious men actively serving our communities. I remember for me, the key principle within our fraternity was brotherhood. I remember it when I was a collegiate at Mississippi State University. I always felt like the brotherhood was our true point of difference. But I also recognized as I was out there on the campaign trail that, brotherhood wasn't being talked about to the level that it needed to have been talked about. Certainly there was some level of consternation within the organization where there was a feeling that a lot of relationships were being compromised. A lot of relationships were being, to some degree, tossed aside, long-term relationships. And we wanted to create some good conversation that would really help drive that. And so when I started putting my campaign together and I started thinking about brotherhood, we magnified our theme. If you look at our campaign 10, we were very intentional to showcase how do we create that uplifting experience. So if you look at my campaign 10, you'll notice that we showed where a brother's pulling someone up. And, again, reflecting back on my days at Mississippi State and really connecting on what brotherhood meant. And so I thought it was important and for us to be very intentional on advancing brotherhood at the beginning of our theme. And so we said a brotherhood. What does that mean? It meant that we were going to be intentional on defining who we were, understanding who we were, and showcasing that unlike other organizations, that's the great essence of Phi Beta Sigma. And so that's where the theme started on brotherhood being first. When we started thinking about conscious, we started saying, hey, you know what? We're going to be intentional on defining us. We're not going to let the media define who we are. We're going to be conscious husbands. We're going to be conscious fathers. We're going to be conscious servants within our communities. And we're going to also be conscious professionals. And so we went about being intentional on recognizing that. And so we said a brotherhood of conscious men actively serving our communities. We recognized that in order for us to actively serve our communities, we first had to love on ourselves. We had to uplift ourselves. And we had to be intentional letting the community know who we were. And so that's where our theme came from. I know when my campaign team is like, Micheal, really? That's a long theme. You really think brothers are going to know it? I said, well, I'm hopeful that they are, but we're going to be intentional on helping define it. And so that's where it came from, and that's kind of how we were intentional about putting it together.
Okay. So now the conclave body elected your executive team of officers who would lead the organization. However, you had to have an idea of the servant leaders you would need to fulfill your programmatic mission. Now, describe the volunteer and professional leadership team you built to implement your vision?
Yeah, first of all, a huge compliment and thanks to the membership on the general board that they were blessed to provide to us to work with. Number one, we genuinely like each other. We genuinely get along. If you look at this board, there's a good reflection of brothers who have served on this board before, so we've had some already working relationships. And the other thing that was really good about having some existing members is that we recognized some of the opportunities from the previous board, so we knew where we could build upon, but we also recognized things that we could improve. But I tell you, looking just past the board, I'm extremely proud of the cabinet that we were able to really pull together. If the membership really look at our cabinet, I think they will agree with me. We didn't necessarily make political appointments. We really looked at two things. One is we wanted to make sure we were able to capture brothers who certainly had really good fraternity experience, but we also wanted to make sure that brothers had some good professional experience along with the passion, because we wanted to make sure that we could really deliver the results that we were seeking. And I just want to reflect just a few of those guys. We got Leonard Larkhart, who serves as our Chief of Staff. Leonard, past Chairman of the Regional Directors Council, past Regional Director. Marcus Cheney, past Regional Director, Deputy Chief. Ray Smith, past Regional Director, Deputy Chief. Joshua Busby, past Regional Director, Deputy Chief. Derek Bowman, who served in Brother Mason's administration in that role, so we brought that experience. But just to talk about some brothers who bring some good professional experience. Charles Jones serves as our Director of Human Resources. But more importantly, Charles is the Vice President of Human Resources for Mondelez, major corporation. Dr. Ernie Hughes, he serves as our Director of Development. Ernie is the Vice President of Truman State University, working within advancement. Kevin Davis serves as our International Director of Publicity. Kevin has worked in branding and marketing for an extended amount of time. And then you look at Janaba Williams. I have to speak about Janaba. Janaba serves as our Director of Sigma Beta Club. Passion for development and mentoring young men, school administrator, but has worked in mentoring for an extended amount of time. And then John White. John serves as our chairman of our Sigma Executive Leadership Council, but John also serves as vice president of Sodexo. And so we got a great general board that really is connecting with us. We've got an excellent cabinet who bring experience within the fraternity, bring a tremendous amount of professional experience, and they have the passion to do the results. And it's one thing, as the leader of the team, certainly creating vision, but not having to just push people to get things done. Yeah. They're coming to the table and delivering. So pretty excited about that.
Good. And if I'm going to remind you, you also, I understand, you did a major call out to a lot of the Brotherhood who had a willingness and a desire to serve. You call them the Conscious Committee.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So when we got on board, as we put together the appointments, we also had recognized, again on the campaign trail, there was a lot of brothers out there saying, hey, I'd love to participate, but it seemed like I've never had an opportunity. Nobody really asked. And so early on in the administration, we put a blast out, and we asked brothers to come and join the Conscious Community. And I tell you, Steve, we had over 400 brothers to sign up. And not just sign up Micheal, Cristal, Steve, Ballard, but signed up Micheal, Cristal, and here's my resume that shows not only my professional experience and my desire to participate, but you could get some insight on me. And we brought our brothers on board, and we've been utilizing a lot of them. And for the ones we couldn't get on every committee, we also partnered up with the regional director to say, hey, here's some brothers in your region that have volunteered, and if we didn't necessarily have a service for them, you might could find some roles for them in their organization. So, yeah, very pleased with that as well.
Okay. So now, you had the vision for the organization. Then you added a consortium of volunteers and industry experts as your team. Ultimately, a roadmap or a blueprint was required as the focus to make a difference in the organization's existence. How will the strategic plan make a difference in the future of the fraternity?
Tell you, Steve, you're asking some pretty good questions, buddy.
Thank you. Try.
So, Steve, one of the first major projects that I did when I came into office, and be reminded this is probably about 6 weeks in, I shared with the general board, shared with the team, I wanted to do a general board strategic planning retreat. I was part of past President Paul Griffin's administration. Matter of fact, I served as President Griffin's chief of staff. The last strategic plan we did was in about 2007. And like everything, it was an opportunity for us to learn some things from that. And to be very honest with you, we kind of looked at that plan, started with that plan, and began to create the vision on what we wanted to accomplish as a result of that plan. But there was a couple of things we wanted to do respectfully a little different. Number one, we wanted to go back to the motherland, our motherland. We wanted to go back to Howard University's campus. And the primary reason we wanted to go back to Howard was we wanted to get in the same setting as the Honorable A. Langston Taylor, Charles I. Brown, Leonard F. Morris, and start to feel what they felt like creating the vision for Phi Beta Sigma. We wanted to set a stage for creating a strategic plan for the future of Phi Beta Sigma. What would Sigma look like 10 years from now, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now? That was our desire. And I tell you, what I was most excited about is that I didn't want to do this myself. I wanted to really get a professional strategic planner to partner with me. And I have to tell a little story because you know me pretty well. I was referred to a brother who I'd never met. Brother's name is Brother Antonio McCoy. I called Antonio. Antonio and I started talking. I started sharing with Antonio kind of what I wanted to do, starting to show some of my passion for it, giving some insight on how I thought it needed to go and maybe what it might need to look like. And Antonio was being as patient with me as he probably could. And he ultimately said to me, he said, Brother President, he said, you called and asked me to do this because you know I do this for a living. I think I'm understanding what you want, but are you going to let me do it or are you going to do it? and the biggest thing I got from that was sometimes you need to minimize yourself and maximize the objective. And once I started minimizing myself and transitioning to him on what I wanted to do and getting out of his way and kind of helping me succeed in achieving what I was seeking, all of a sudden, man, it started coming together. And this was over the course of about 4 weeks of trying to get to know each other. And over the course of 4 weeks, we ultimately pulled that together. But I tell you, Steve, we went there. We invited past presidents. We invited current general board members. We invited 7 brothers from across the country that I'd kind of met on the campaign trail who had great passion and beliefs on what they thought Sigma should be doing or looking forward to. And we invited all of those personalities to come in with a blank sheet of paper, if you will, saying, hey, what do we believe Phi Beta Sigma should look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? And asked Antonio to kind of help drive that. And here's what I was most impressed with. We walked out of that room with 10 key focus areas. And Antonio told us that, Brother President, there's no way you're going to be able to work on 10 things. You need to segment this. So you need to segment it in the context of probably a phase 1 or a phase 2. And so we said for phase 1, brotherhood experience, branding, membership growth, finances, and technology. And I would tell you, Steve, from that academic year, fall of 2017 to the summer of 2018, we went to work on those 5 focus areas. What did that look like? We identified champions. Champions went to the spring general board meeting and shared with the board members the work that they had done. And then the champions went to regional conferences and shared with the membership the work that they've done. And then our goal this fall is to give great insight on the strategies on how it's going to now have positive impact within the membership and within the chapters. And then this fall coming up, we're going to work on phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be policies and procedures, corporate and government partnerships, programming, fundraising, training, and advisor development. And the last thing on the answer that I'm extremely proud of is that we're blessed to have Winston O'Neill and Dr. Anthony Samad attending. The brothers out there will know both of those names because they know those two brothers were candidates for the office of International President. But here's what I've always known. I know as I was campaigning, I knew that I did not have the monopoly on great ideas for the advancement of Phi Beta Sigma. Dr. Samad had great ideas that he was champion. Winston had great ideas that he was champion. And I'm excited that they're going to be there to participate with us to help really effectuate our phase 2. And so really looking forward to it, about 4 weeks away, and really excited about what the future of the fraternity looks like.
That's good. Well, it's very clear that yet again, with this roadmap moving forward, you're bringing together a consortium of leaders again and staying focused on that. But I want to roll back just a little bit again, since we're reflecting over this first year. From the onset of when coming into this administration, you had to tackle and resolve a couple of issues that were of major concern to the membership, i.e. The International Executive Director and the chosen site for Conclave 2019 in Las Vegas. How did you instinctively decide to approach each circumstance?
Good one. Since you went back, can I go back if you don't mind?
You sure can.
I just want to share, because I do think it's important as I talk about the strategic plan. There was two big things that came out of that strategic plan that I just want to give the membership some more insight on. Number one, when we really looked at the finances, we recognized as a fraternity, a 104-year-old fraternity, we really didn't have an endowment for our fraternity. For me personally, for you personally, for many of our members out there personally, you couldn't imagine not having prepared financially for my family. If you're a member of a church, all of us are alumnus from a college or a university, couldn't imagine not protecting the financial solvency of our organization. And so one of the things that we had a vision for, and we saw a tremendous amount of value, and we were very intentional of really capturing that out of the retreat, was we wanted to set up an endowment. And so when we came out of our finance focus area, we birthed Impact One, which is our capital campaign. And it was through the excellent work of Dr. Hughes. But we did that in partnership with past President, the Honorable Peter Adams, which meant that we had an opportunity to restructure our National Phi Beta Sigma Foundation. How do we make that live and how do we make it active? So now today, we have a vessel, we have a vehicle that our brothers and our community, government, corporate can invest in Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. And as we do that, we can create long-term solvency for the organization. Our goal is to raise about $2 million between now and 2021. Brothers, if you hadn't had a chance to make a donation, I got to get a plug in, Steve. Please, as alumni, make a $150 donation. To our collegiate brothers, let's make a $50 donation. And again, you're making it to the long-term solvency of your organization. So 20, 30, 40 years from now, the work we're doing is going to protect the long-term solvency of the organization. So now I'll go back to your question. I think you asked me about Conclave Vegas, and you talked a little bit about maybe the IED. I want to talk about the IED first, if you don't mind. Okay. And so let's think about this for a second, because I want to take the membership back to Conclave Detroit. And I'm thinking about myself right now, if you don't mind. So on that Saturday night, I've been blessed. I've been elected president. At this point, I've been pinned. And so I'm celebrating. My family is there. I've got chapter brothers there, regional brothers there, obviously brothers on the team. It's a very glorious and celebratory mood. So I'm feeling good about myself. I come to the post-general board meeting that Sunday morning. Historically, a non-event kind of board meeting, historically is what that is. And so I'm kind of walking into that meeting. And I'm going into that with that kind of attitude, with that kind of, bravado about myself. I get into the board meeting, and I recognize I do have something a little important that I need to share with the board. But I go through, I introduce my appointments, it's flowing. The board gives me unanimous approval on all the appointments that I introduce. And then I get to the last thing I want to talk about. And I share with the board that our current International Executive Director, Sam Walthour, has provided his resignation. And along with his resignation, we have negotiated a contract with him for a 3-month severance package. And when I said that board meeting and those board members went ballistic. A normal 30-minute board meeting went for about 2 hours. and not only did it go about 2 hours, some board members almost missed their flight. And so it became a little bit of an extremely rocky start. And I tell you that story because, again, I think it's important for you to recognize when things aren't necessarily right or not making the right connection, you've got to do a course correction. And so we heard the concerns that the board members had. We recognized the concerns they had. And so we quickly went back and renegotiated with Brother Walthour. And we renegotiated in 2 areas. One was we knew that there was a desire on Sam's part to resign. And so we knew we needed to immediately put into place a search committee for our International Executive Director. The other thing we said that morning was we were going to put an interim Executive Director in. Board wasn't feeling that either. And so, but again, back to Sam, wanted to resign. We knew we needed to put a search committee, and we recognized we were going to need someone to serve in that interim capacity. And so I had a conversation with Sam. I said, Sam, what would be your thought about serving in the interim role? You've announced your resignation. We've accepted it, but we will keep you on board a little bit longer. He said, Brother President, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I said, okay. I said, we put the search committee in place, got it up, got it running, announced it. So I went back to the board. And this happened in the course of about maybe a week and a half, a little less than 2 weeks. I went back to the board and I shared with the board, here's what I think we can do to satisfy the concerns you have and satisfy the objective I wanted to achieve. One is Sam will certainly keep his resignation. He will serve in that interim role. We won't pay him 3 months severance pay. Whatever pay we're going to give him, he's going to earn that pay. And we'll still have an opportunity to put a search committee out there and ultimately find the executive director that we're wanting. And so once we shared that with the board, they received that presentation unanimous. And as one board member told me, he said, nice, quick recovery. And so I was pretty excited about that. And again, you talk about the ultimate compromise. It satisfied what I wanted, and it ultimately satisfied what the board wanted. I think you asked me about Conclave Vegas.
Absolutely.
So, you think about Conclave Vegas, and again, I think it's important as a leader to really have a good understanding of the pulse of your organization. And so, you're out there on the campaign trail and you're listening to brothers really advance some strong negative energy around not Vegas. I think the brothers were excited about going to Vegas. The concern was not so excited about the property that we had selected. And I have to give Brother Mason a lot of credit. And he recognized that there were some concerns with that as well. I've said it publicly, I've said it privately, and I'll say it this morning. The contract that Brother Mason negotiated, to me, was one of the best contracts I've seen. And the context of the value that we're getting, the room rates, I'm going brain dead on the resort fee, being a part of it. It was excellent. Everything we need, as you know, to accommodate, perfect. But brothers just were not filling the property. And so Past President Mason and I, we kind of talked during our transition of, what could we do to kind of maybe have an opportunity to reintroduce this idea to the membership. And so we came up with the idea of what if we put together a little contest. We got a new president. What if we put together a contest where we would give brothers an opportunity to go with the new president on a site visit? I'd never seen the property before either. And so we put a contest in place. We had two brothers to join us. You were there as well, if you recall. I don't think you probably seen the property either.
I had not.
Yeah. So we went there, and like anything, and I think the membership is learning this about me, I'm pretty strategic. I go into something with some clear expected outcomes to come out of it. And so I went to the site visit with a few objectives. Number one is I wanted to meet with the senior executive team of the property. I wanted to meet with them and understand what commitments had they made to provide renovation to the property. But I didn't just want to meet with them privately. I also wanted to videotape them and to kind of do an interview so I could showcase to the membership not what Micheal was saying, but what was the property leadership saying. So that was one objective. The second one was, and this was a huge one, we needed to get the support of the regional director. Brother Armstrong certainly had a lot of concerns about the property. His biggest one was, with respect, he was not actively involved in the process. So he felt a strong level of disconnect of the participation. And so we wanted to make sure whatever concerns he had, that we would address those. And then the third one, which is kind of parallel to Mark, because Mark is a member of the local chapter, the local chapter had a lot of concerns as well. And so before we got on that plane, we had three objectives. We wanted to meet with the property to understand the renovations. We wanted to really get the support of the regional director, and we wanted to listen to the concerns of the local chapter. And I tell you, Steve, we were successful on getting all three of those. We sat down with the property owners and really understood the investment, had a great conversation with them, videotaped it, had an excellent conversation with Mark. I can see him sitting upstairs in my room, kind of expressing his concerns. Matter of fact, I think you were there with me when I visited with him. And we got through that, and then a little intimidating, but kind of funny, because you'll remember this too. We had dinner with the local chapter. And I'll never forget, I walked in that room, and I think it might have been 50 or 50 plus brothers in that room. And it was almost like me against the world. But I tell you, we were able to have some really frank, open conversation with the brothers, and I remember sharing with them. I tend to like to take a complex problem and make it kind of simple. I remember sharing with them, brothers, we're in this thing together now. The contract is signed. It's going to cost us a significant amount of money to get out of it. So let's go ahead and get past that one. Let's go into the arena of, let's talk about your concerns. Let's talk about what you have issues with, and let's see if we can resolve those issues. And I think once I kind of said that, you could feel a little bit of the weight of the room kind of come off, and then we ultimately had some good conversation and we got on board. So I left there achieving everything that we hoped for, and now we got enthusiastic support from Mark Armstrong. We got enthusiastic support from the local chapter. You know this. We've already put together about 95% of our Conclave Vegas packet. We've had an international call on Conclave Vegas. We've got a little over 230 brothers already registered for Conclave Vegas. And we've already got the Honorable Congressman John Lewis and Harry Belafonte serving as honorary chairman. We are extremely ahead of our planning. We've jumped the hurdle of the concerns, and I think we're positioned to have a very successful Conclave Vegas next year.
Okay, good stuff. So as I listen, as you reference this, you were strategic in your response to the circumstances.
Absolutely.
You had your finger on the pulse of the membership and the sentiments that were occurring at the time, and then you engaged other leaders to the issue and then worked out a plan. Similarly, that kind of leads to my next question, okay? So in 1 year's time, this administration has conducted some very productive working meetings relative to like planning the organization's future. What was your thought behind making the strategic planning retreat, the spring 2018 general board meeting, and the National Sigma Beta Club Leadership Conference in New Orleans more work-driven? And how have they been successful?
Again, you got some good questions, young man.
I think so.
You do. So thinking about the retreat, we've kind of talked a little bit about that. I would tell you, I felt before we did anything, we had to do the retreat first. We were very intentional on doing the retreat. And I would have to say this too, something I didn't mention earlier. I talked about the Impact One and the foundations. But there's always a halo effect, right? And so one of the things that I've noticed, I know you engage in social media as well. I've noticed on social media, a lot of our regions are doing retreats. A lot of our chapters are doing retreats. And I think as many of our members left that retreat, they saw a lot of value in some really pre-planning, long-term planning, and the benefits centered around it. And so, very proud of that. And again, recognizing before we could do anything, we had to really lay the groundwork of what next steps look like. But I would like to talk a little bit about the spring board meeting and the Sigma Beta Club. When I started thinking about my first board meeting as the president, I had an opportunity to do some reflection. I'm a 20-year veteran on this general board, so I've been to a lot of board meetings, right? And so many of us through the course of our tenure have always talked about, man, all we do is we go to these board meetings and we hear all these reports, and we just hear all these reports. And I also bring experience from an outside board. I was blessed to chair the Memphis affiliate of the National Urban League, chaired that board for about 3 years. And so I had an opportunity to contrast what I've seen in Sigma, but more importantly, what I've seen in other boards. And so when I came to my first board meeting, it was an opportunity for me to do something a little different. And so again, I looked at the board meeting. What did I want to accomplish? Well, I tell you, the first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to restructure the format of it. I wanted to make sure that when you bring board members together, we need to be together. And so I didn't want us to have a meeting and 4 brothers go have dinner over there and 3 brothers go have dinner over there and some people just hang out back at the hotel. I want to be very intentional. Brothers knew when they came after the board meeting, we would have dinner. I think we were Friday, Saturday, so Friday night we'd have dinner. Saturday night we would have dinner. Not that we needed some place to eat. Of course we needed that. But it's an opportunity for the board to become more cohesive. It's an opportunity for the board to work better. It's an opportunity for brothers to get to know each other better, not just on a personal level, but professionally. And then strategically, what makes Micheal tick? What makes Steve tick? And so spend some time together. That was number one. Number two, I also wanted to do the traditional reporting. Yes, we got to know about our finances, and yes, we got to get the legal and risk updates, and we got to hear from some of the targeted officers and some of the targeted committees. And so we were going to do that, but we were just going to dedicate one day to that. The other part was we wanted to build off of the excellent work that we had done back in September. If you think back, we had put together a strategic plan. One of the things Antonio said, and many professional brothers know this, so often people put together a strategic plan, but if I can metaphorically reflect, they kind of put them in a drawer and they just kind of go there. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to take our plan and keep our plan alive. And so as I shared with you earlier, the champions were working October, November, and December. We were conference calling and meeting. And I shared with the board, when we come to the spring board meeting, you're going to hear from the strategic champions on the work that they have done. So the second day, we dedicated that to the update of the phase 1 work that we had done. And we didn't just share that with you and the board, just like I'm speaking to the members, we streamed that. So the entire membership had an opportunity to witness the traditional board meeting, but the entire work that our focus champions were working on. And then the second part of day 2 is, again, a lot of experience here. I knew that we had never, and if I'm wrong, some of the past presidents can correct me, but certainly hadn't done it during my experience on the board, and that was we had never done any general board development on really making sure that our board members understood what their roles were. And so I asked Antonio, who was our strategic planner, I said, come to our general board meeting, and I want you to do some board development training. And so on the back half of that day, we spent about 3 hours on board development, really making sure board members understood, here's what you're supposed to be working on. And what was exciting about that, Steve, was part of my report, I had a message for the board, and I was respectfully pretty clear. Here's what I'm looking for in board members. I said I wanted a board that was working on long-term solutions. I didn't want a board working on day-to-day. That's you and Daryl's job. That's his headquarters staff job. I wanted a board who was really focusing on bringing personal resources or resources that they had influences on, bringing that to the organization, because we had a responsibility to provide resources to you and Daryl so that you could effectuate the policy that we were talking about. And then I said, I want a board that is working on issues that have a positive impact on the African American male, but doing that work through our Sigma Beta Club. And so I was very intentional on defining my expectations for the board on a somewhat general/specific way. And then Antonio was coming in, formally training the board on here are the key areas that you should be working on. And so we walked into that board meeting with the intent of redesigning it, providing some fellowship, certainly doing some of the traditional things of yesterday, but more importantly, how do we do some things a little bit differently? The last one you talked about is Beta Club. I won't go through that one in great length. I'll just share with you that we knew that for 2018, we had an opportunity to really connect with our members in a different way. And what does that mean? In the past, we had the Sirius Sigma Summit during our off-conclave years. So 2018 would have been that year. We wanted to really advance the Sigma Beta Club. We said, again, in our campaign, that the centerpiece of our programmatic focus area would be our Sigma Beta Club. I shared with Janaba early on, I said, I want to do a National Sigma Beta Club conference, and I want to use that conference as an opportunity to showcase to the nation how serious Phi Beta Sigma is about the nurturing, developing, but more importantly, the mentoring of young African-American boys. And so we shared that idea internally. We got good buy-in internally. Then I went and knocked on the door of the Regional Directors Council. Matter of fact, it was a year ago this weekend, because we had our Regional Directors Retreat. It was during this retreat that I shared with the Regional Directors Council my vision, and they gave me immediate support. I went and knocked on the door of Arthur Thomas, president of the Sigma Beta Club Foundation, also past president. Loved the idea. And then I obviously shared it with the general board. Loved the idea. We got unanimous support on it. We created the vision, the scope of it, fast forwarded, far exceeded our expectations. We had over 180 Sigma Beta Club advisors there. Great representation in New Orleans. Also an opportunity to fellowship and support also during that boule. Got great press. We did a major press release all across the country to let the nation know our position on Sigma Beta Club, and we were able to really generate some excitement and enthusiasm within the the membership as well. So 3 key events: the retreat, the spring board meeting, and certainly the National Sigma Beta Club conference. Really proud of all 3 of those.
Okay. So we hear very clearly why it's work-driven. What's consistently I'm hearing and what you're saying is strategic, focus, and long-term planning for results. Now we're going to flip the script just a little bit. We're going to change a little bit. Real Talk. Real Talk has become Phi Beta Sigma's very own forum for discussing critical issues that affect the African American culture and young males in particular. You've used this venue to speak your message louder. What has been the benefit as you prepare for the next Real Talk in just a couple of weeks?
You know, first of all, again, I think it's so important that projects, initiatives that are working, you keep them. Yeah. You know, huge compliment to President Mason for having the vision for Real Talk. I remember him and I talking about that, and probably the biggest thing I remember him sharing was certainly Phi Beta Sigma has had a level of participation and engagement in the Congressional Black Caucus weekend or week, but we just kind of came and went to events. We weren't really doing anything, and he had a desire to really create a forum for us, Phi Beta Sigma, to convey our messaging around what he saw, what we saw as an opportunity to really advance our messaging for change within the community. And so thusly, Real Talk was born. And again, huge compliment to President Mason for that vision. I love your question, Steve, because we wanted to just build upon that. Except, again, we wanted to advance what Sigma was doing, not a general conversation within the community, but what was Sigma doing, and how could that messaging support the vision that we had for the fraternity? That vision, a brotherhood of conscious men, intentional, the talented 10th, college-educated men. What are we doing to drive change in the community? And so 2017, you know this because you partnered up with me. We introduced our first one, and it was centered around defining the conscious man committed to serve. Key word, Phi Beta Sigma, is defining the conscious man. We're not reading it in the newspaper. We're not letting the media tell us. We're participating in that conversation. And we had a great panel, if you recall. John Lewis was on that panel. Joe Madison was on that panel. Chris Ray, our current Director of Social Action. Dr. Sidney McPhee, who's the president of Middle Tennessee State University, was on that panel and had great discussion around that key component, defining the mission. And so this year, about 4 weeks from now, we're coming back again with Real Talk, except for this time, we got a different message. It is a conscious man role in having good discussion addressing police brutality within the African American community. Now, think about that for a second. We all have witnessed and seen all of the many challenges that have happened within our community as a result of the hands of police. That's just fact. But as men within our community, what role do we have on minimizing that? What role do we have? And how do we define that? And so we knocked on the door of Brother Frank Nichols, a celebrated police chief. We knocked on the door of the Honorable Dr. Anthony Samad, who's now the executive director of past Congressman Marvin Dineley. We knocked on the door of Brother Elijah Cummins. We knocked on the door of Justin Fairfax. Some of you might not know that name, but I tell you, you're going to learn that name. He's the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. And we knocked on the door of a name, Jonathan Butler, who is a community activist at the University of Missouri. And so we have an excellent panel of people from law enforcement, people from government, people from academia, as in Dr. Samad, and then we got activists who are going to play a major role in helping us understand what's our role on minimizing that level of activity happening in our community. And so when we think about how we're utilizing Real Talk to advance our messaging, we're going to use Real Talk to really help effectuate our vision for Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, and more importantly, the impact that we wanted to have within our communities.
Great. You mentioned this earlier, and clearly the Trilogy of Change has its primary focus on impacting the young African American male, with your emphasis on the Sigma Beta Club and our collegiate Sigma brothers. Now, describe how your recently held Sigma Week on Capitol Hill and the increased investment in mentoring is making a difference.
You know, Steve, when you use the phrase Trilogy of Change, you know, one of the things I think the membership is learning about me, I love words. I tend to believe words matter. And when you package them around the Trilogy of Change and you connect it to the Sigma Beta Club, I kind of want to connect the dots, if you don't mind. Because here's what we know. We know that if a young person is experiencing positive images, having the experience of individuals showing love and appreciation for them, they tend to perform better. We also know that we are very blessed to have a 68-year-old organization called the Sigma Beta Club. What we looked to see was how could we really magnify the impact of our Sigma Beta Club. And so what we started having conversation with Janabu about was how do we look at this young kid How do we pour love into this young kid? How do we coach, develop, nurture, and mentor this young kid and transform his life, toward a better experience? Comma, but don't stop there. How do we now become very intentional on helping this young man become a college student, but also become a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity? Because we started that nurturing and developing as a Sigma Beta Club. And now we still have this young man as a college student, and now we're coaching and developing this young man as a member of Phi Beta Sigma during his collegiate years. But again, we don't stop there. And now that we've introduced him to something called the Sigma Executive Leadership Council, he knows that since he's connected with Sigma, Phi Beta Sigma is going to be committed to him on helping identify gainful employment for him. And so as he come out of college, we're going to do everything we can to supply employment for him. So now, gainfully employed, he's financially literate, he's coming into the community a better man with good intentions on how he can be a great servant leader. And so all of a sudden, that young Sigma Beta Club member from 10, 12 years old who transitioned to a college student and a member of the fraternity, who is now transitioned into a young alumni who is gainfully employed, understands financial literacy, understands being a servant leader, understands faith and how he makes a connection on developing family, is going to have a huge positive impact on the African American community and the larger community as a whole. And it all started with that Sigma Beta Club. And so that's the trilogy of change. Sigma Beta Club, collegiate, young alumni, servant leader. And so that's what we're talking about. That's how we're advancing it. And that's how I believe we're going to really make not just change, but long-term change, measurable change. And again, not being redundant, just trying to make the point. It started with that Sigma Beta Club 10 years old, 12 years old. So, Steve, I want to talk a little bit about Sigma Week on Capitol Hill. Number one, again, tried and true. We've done it before. But one of the things I shared with Chris Ray, our International Director of Social Action, I said to Chris, as we invited these 13 collegians, and wow, what a great experience they had. If they were on camera here, they would say, what a life-altering experience I witnessed. I had an opportunity to really walk the halls of Congress. I had a chance to engage with congressmen that I'll speak about here in just a second. I had a great opportunity for a reflection of the young men on the experience that we had. But as I talked with Chris, I said, Chris, I want to do something a little different. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I know I've used that phrase a few times during this conversation. But the thing I wanted to do different this time is I wanted us to go for our Sigma Week on the Hill. I wanted us to go with bills that we had already researched and that we could partner with Congress individuals, Congresswomen as well as Congressmen, on helping to support the passing of those bills. And so we went to our Sigma Week on the Hill with 4 bills that we were going to focus on. I don't remember the bills, but I remember the subjects. One was centered around educational development. Another one was centered around small business. Another one was centered around health advocacy as well. And so we went to the Hill with those bills, and we went and did some policy advocacy development training so that our members would know how to go and engage with the congressman. But we also were blessed to have about 5 congressmen to come and speak to us. And 4 of those Congress individuals were connected with those bills. And I'll call off a few names. I know I'll probably miss a couple, but Marsha Fudge was there. Cedric Richmond, who is the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, he was there. Congressman Butterfield was there as well, whose father is a member of our fraternity. And so we had that experience. And then afterwards, which I thought was really nice, and not really afterwards, during the week, and I give Chris a lot of credit for this one. We brought those young men to have an experience on Capitol Hill. When you talk about mentoring, we also brought those young men to go through the Arthur Mitchell Leadership Institute. Now, for our members, I'm hoping they know the name Arthur Mitchell. Arthur Micheal is a congressman, or a previous congressman, but he's also a past president of our great fraternity. And Chris had the infinite wisdom idea to bring the young men and take them through a series of leadership development. And came off extremely well. When I talk about a life-altering experience, we went to the African American Historical Museum, took them to some other historical sites here. And if you were to witness the recording that we did via social media, all of those young men talked about how excited they were, so appreciative of their fraternity, bringing them to it. And so it came off extremely good. And I know it's something they will forever remember.
Celebrating the Brotherhood experience, you're absolutely right. During the Founders Day tour, that message very much resonated with the Brotherhood as you traveled. But also, speaking of the Brotherhood experience, you led a cause that really supported our brothers who were suffering and experienced disaster with the Natural Disaster Relief Fund. Clearly a significance. Explain.
Yeah, you never know when causes are going to find themselves at your doorstep. Matter of fact, we were here, I can't remember the event, but we were here when the hurricane hit. And it primarily hit in Texas, but as it matured, we also saw it had some impact in the eastern region. We saw some impact within the southern region. And so working in collaboration with Chris Ray, who was our Director of Social Action, at that particular time, working in collaboration with Edwin Miles, who was the Regional Director of the Gulf Coast. And then we also ultimately worked with Brother Stephen Nisley, Director of Education, and Brother Reginald Slush, our Director of Bigger and Better Business. We worked with those three individuals on putting together a really good initiative around providing support to our brothers. I should say we also partnered up with Peter Adams with the National Phi Beta Sigma Foundation. And here's what our goal was. We reached out to the membership to respond in helping our own. And we were very blessed and very fortunate. We raised a little less than $20,000. And this time, not too often do we say, you know what, it really doesn't matter if you're financial, doesn't matter if you're unfinancial. That was not the paramount objective. The paramount objective was, there were some brothers in Texas, hurricane hit, flooding, lost everything. How do we support those brothers? And we were able to raise those dollars. We partnered up with the regional directors, provided some gift cards to those brothers, were able to support them during their time of need. Again, a brotherhood of conscious men actively serving our community. A brotherhood. We responded to the brothers first, and very proud of the work we did, but most appreciative of the support that the members gave us on providing that opportunity to those brothers.
Good stuff. What's also very important to you is the fraternity's brand. The brand is a major priority in this administration. Can you explain your intense significance with branding and how it has improved in one short year?
Again, I kind of talked about this a little bit when we had discussion around Conclave Vegas. Passion, emotions, I'll use the word, some frustration. I would say that's applicable to this subject as well. Brothers got a lot of passion and concern about our brand. And the real reason they have the passion and the concern is because we as an organization, we haven't given great guidance to our chapters and to our members on how to effectuate our brand. And I always like to say, again, not taking nothing to be too simple, but how do you take this complex challenge and make it simple? Nike, McDonald's, Kroger, we could never imagine not having our brand out within the community, out within the market, and everyone not understanding that brand. And all of the stakeholders who have a connection to that brand on how to respect that brand. we couldn't ever imagine it. No major corporations could imagine it. To be quite frank, even the local mom and pop couldn't imagine that, because that brand is the most relevant identifier for you. And so again, I go back to, again, appointing people who have the skill sets, who has the passion, and who has the drive to make a difference. And I tell you, Kevin has come in and really done just a fantastic job on advancing one simple message: one Sigma, one brand. One Sigma, one brand. And you know, his focus has been showcasing the right colors, making sure we're giving good guidance on logos and identifiers, giving guidance even around our Sigma Beta Club. I talked about that a few minutes ago. Again, when I talked about the champions, he took the message around the country. Of all the attendees, none of the other champions get upset with me, but of all the attendees coming to the presentation, his room was the fullest, because brothers really wanted to understand what were we doing about advancing our branding. And so here's what the rollout looks like. I talked about him going around the regional conferences. This fall, we're going to have education and training webinars. He's going to roll out graphic resources and templates during the fall. During January the 1st, 2019, you're going to see visual brand standards being introduced. And then for every standard, there has to be an expectation. And so there's also going to be some enforcement, and that's going to happen January the 1st as well. So very proud of the work that Kevin has done. Very important work that I know our members want. But why do we want it, Steve? We want it the same reason Nike wants us to recognize and respect that swoosh. We don't want to do anything that compromises the integrity of the seal and the history of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity.
Good stuff, good stuff. I'm going to go back a little bit to the strategic plan.
Okay.
Brotherhood experience is the first focus area for the strategic plan. And Brotherhood first, of course, is the fraternity's tagline we're currently using. When one considers your 2018 Founders Day message and the Natural Disaster Relief Fund, Brotherhood clearly has a significance. Please elaborate.
You know, it kind of goes back, Steve, to when I was sharing the messaging around how we came up with the theme and what we had felt as we were really kind of putting the whole campaign together, that whole messaging around brotherhood. And so I thought when I wanted to get to the retreat, that shadow was still there. We walked into the retreat, brothers talking about brotherhood and the experience that I've had as a brother. And as we got into our conversation, to be quite frank, and again, you were there, that became probably one of our most heated discussions. Torian Richardson, who ultimately became our Brotherhood Experience champion, was very passionate about what his experience was like and what he had witnessed and how he was challenging us to open ourselves up to understand everybody's experience is different. So how do we peel this onion all the way back so that we can ultimately get to the opportunity of the most least effective impact, is I think the way I said, meaning frustrations that people had. And so we had a lot of discussion around that. And to me, that's how it became our number one focus area. And he went around the country sharing, interviewing brothers, understanding what their experiences were. But I thought it wasn't enough just to kind of keep it within that strategic area. I too wanted to kind of share my thoughts about what the Brotherhood experience was like. And so when I was blessed to go out as president for my first Founders Day message, I wanted my message to be around the Brotherhood experience. And I said, let's celebrate the Brotherhood experience. And I wanted to go to a place that I had a not so good Brotherhood experience in. I shared this quick story that I think is relevant. You know, I had a chance to go to Alpha Sigma chapter when I was a candidate. And I went there, and I'm having a chance to kind of present my case to be elected president. And I had a brother in the chapter just really went at me hard. I mean, went at me very hard. And I sit there, and I kind of took it, once I finished, and he kind of gave me his concerns. I made an effort to answer him. And then after the meeting, he and I sat down and talked some more. and I'll never forget, we got through the conversation, but we also ended up having a chance to kind of laugh a little bit and joke around a little bit. And I tell that story to fast forward back to our Founders Day. Obviously, I ultimately was seeking that chapter support. I didn't get that chapter support. I ultimately got elected president. And I said to my team, I said, my first Founders Day speech, I want to make it in Alpha Sigma's chapter. And I wanted to make it in Alpha Sigma's chapter for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason was it's our oldest chapter. And as I shared with the chapter on the trail, I think we have a responsibility to really magnify two chapters within our organization, Alpha Chapter and Alpha Sigma. Not that the other chapters are not important, as I like to say professionally, don't hear the wrong thing, but those two chapters, historical chapters. And so how do we establish a better working relationship, fraternity, national, with those two chapters? And so I want to deliver my first message there. And so I was able to do that. I went to that chapter, gave a speech, but this is the part that connects on the Brotherhood experience. After the speech, that same brother in Alpha Sigma chapter who had given me that very tough time, he came up to me. He said, you know, you said you would come back and work with our chapter. He said, you proved me wrong. And he said, I want to thank you for that. And then he went on to say, whatever I can do to help you, please reach out. I'm here for you. Number one, he didn't have to do that. Number two, I was so appreciative of him doing it. And I was so thankful for him doing it, because the one thing that we're sitting here talking about is how can we as brothers look past the Micheal's words, the goofiness, and really work in collaboration to advance something we call the greatness of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. And this particular brother, he responded to that, and I was so proud of him. And he and I just kind of laughed and kind of have a little fun now on social media. But that's why we did it. That's why it was important. And we took that, as you know, Steve, we took it across the country. We went to 4 cities. Let's see, I think I went to D.C., we went to Philadelphia, we went to Memphis, and we went to Huntsville, Alabama, and had a great time across the country.
You know, it takes a special skill to navigate leading large groups of people. You've constantly risen in leadership, not only in the fraternity, but simultaneously within the Kroger Corporation. One of your favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein. It's not that I'm smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. Why has that quote resonated with you, and how does it lend to your personal leadership style?
First of all, Steve, thanks for the kind words. You know, for me, all I ever really wanted was to be a credit to the organization. That's all I ever wanted. I never really imagined myself being president of the fraternity. It wasn't until I became international first vice president that I even started thinking about the idea of really having an opportunity to be president. I remember walking on the campus at Mississippi State University, blessed to be chapter president. All I wanted to do was, how do I make my chapter better? Alumni chapter president in Memphis, you know, how do I make my chapter better? When I was regional director of the Southwestern region, we were able to accomplish some really great things, but, you know, how do I make my region better? And it's all built on the foundation of, how do I be a credit to the organization? You know, when you think about Albert Einstein and the quote that you just stated, you know, it's so important to me that when you hear the phrase, it's not that I'm so smart. Because, see, I believe that. I mean, I respect my IQ, but I also recognize when I'm in a room, there's a really good chance there's probably some people in that room a little bit smarter than me. But you know what? I'm okay with that. And the reason I'm okay with that is I'm always in search of an opportunity to learn something. And so I'm not intimidated by the person in the room smarter. It's an opportunity for me to tap into that mind and capture what it is that I can learn. But here's where I think I might start separating myself from the rest of the pack. And that is, I tend to stay with things longer. If I'm committed to something, I'm committed to it. And it doesn't matter whether it's X or if it's Y or Z. I'm not going to stop until it's completed. And I can reflect back on my collegiate years on those experiences. I remember back when I was alumni chapter president, I had a desire to put on something called the African American Male Image Award Scholarship Banquet. Nowhere in the city of Memphis was anybody doing anything providing recognition to the great work that African American men were doing. We weren't called the Sigma chapter. We were not providing scholarships. Had a foundation, had some money. We weren't giving it away. And I'm chapter president, but I couldn't get the chapter to move on it. Tried, couldn't happen. So I came out of office. And when I came out of office, I said I was going to chair that event. It took me almost 4 years to do it. Didn't get it done until we had a regional conference in the city. And I said, because we all know we do banquets during a regional conference, right? Mm-hmm. I said our banquet is going to be called what? The African American Male Image Award Scholarship Banquet. We did our first one then. Fast forward almost 23 years later, it's our legacy event within our chapter. We've given away over $100,000 worth of scholarships. We've recognized about 40 different students, over 50, 60 men within our community. I tend to stay with problems because I believe in the resolution. And so for me, I'm not going to stop until we have a serious endowment for our fraternity. I'm not going to stop until Phi Beta Sigma is recognized as a leading organization that is focusing on empowering, mentoring, and developing young boys of color. And so when I hear that quote from Einstein, it's not that I'm the smartest guy in the room. What it is I tend to stay with problems more because I'm looking for solutions to the problem.
Wow. And speaking on that, as I listen to you and I hear what you've shared with us, I see some consistent things. I see that you are strategic, you're focused, you're intentional, and engaging.
You sound like the board members there. They use that on me all the time.
On that same vein, you served the fraternity faithfully for many years and on all levels. Throughout your years of service, you've made your priorities clear: God, family, and work. Describe the importance of Team Cristal, as I call it, who is your wife and 3 children, and when it comes to your commitment to the fraternity.
You know, it's funny how you know that because, one of the things that I talk a lot about, and it might not always be popular, but I talk a lot about it, and that is what my life trajectory is. For me, it's God, it's family, it's my career, and then it's Sigma. It's my faith, my family, my career, and then it's the fraternity. I tend to believe that those 3 are important in the upper tier because if I don't have those 3 right, I do not have the best opportunity to support Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. And so I share with our membership, you need to make sure that you are focusing, collegiates, you make sure you're focusing on your academics. Young alumni, you make sure you're focusing on your career. If that means you need to make the sacrifice with Sigma, you make that sacrifice. You balance that so that you make sure that your priorities are straight. If I ever have to make a decision between my career and Sigma, it's going to be my career every time. As your international president, if I have to make a decision between my career and Sigma, it's going to be my career every time. But I'm not just doing that. I would strongly encourage you to do that because we need you to be a very productive student who's advancing, achieving your degree. And as a career person, we need you to advance in your career. When you get those 2 right, you have a better opportunity to invest in the fraternity. Probably one of my proudest moments was when I look back at my career in 2013, or to be very honest, look back at my life in 2013. 2013, you blessed me to be elected as your International First Vice President. I got a major career promotion in Atlanta as Director of Operations. In 2015, you blessed me by re-electing me as your International First Vice President. I got promoted Vice President of Merchandising in Seattle. In 2017, you elected me and blessed me to become your International President, And in 2017, I got promoted Vice President of Operations. To me, it's all about the balance. And if you don't have the balance, you don't win. And I think Phi Beta Sigma men are winners. And so when you ask me about Team Cristal, one of the things I'm most proud of is the support and love and appreciation I get from my wife, Marty. Marty's been on this Sigma train with me for 35 years. We met when we were freshmen. I pledged in the spring of 1982. We were dating at the time. When I was chapter president, she was president of the Sigma Doves. We don't have those anymore, but back during that time we did. She was president of the Sigma Doves. When I was alumni chapter president, she was very supportive in what we were doing as alumni chapter president. When I was regional director, as she would say, and the paperwork said it because the brothers in the region saw it, she was my executive assistant. She made copies of all of the information and materials that I was sending out, all the intake packets that I ultimately had to send to this headquarters. Marty was making all those copies for me. So she's been intimately involved with me as I've gone through this Sigma world, if you will. My three children, Lauren, Brandon, and Jalen, you guys know Brandon, a member of the fraternity. They've all been supportive of me as I've gone through my process with the fraternity as well as my career. And the part that I'm really proud of, I'm really proud of Lauren and Brandon and the nice young adults that they've become. And many of you might know this. Marty and I are blessed to have a special needs son, Jalen. And I'm so appreciative of the development that Jalen is experiencing. And all of that is happening, though, because of the great support I get from my wife. I used to say when I was regional director, because I think this is important, Steve, any of us who are blessed to serve in a leadership role in the fraternity, we know there's some travel that goes with that. But the one thing I used to always say, and still say to this day, is when I get off that plane and I get home, I never have to walk into the house with frustration and angst on why you're not here, or where you've been, or any of that. Marty has always been very supportive of me being able to go out and do the work of Sigma and her being supportive. And she's been supportive of my career. I've moved that lady and my kids 6 times. You know, we moved from Memphis to Cincinnati to Little Rock, back to Memphis to Atlanta to Seattle, and now I'm in Phoenix, and we've been blessed to get a home in Atlanta. So we've moved a few times. And my point on all of that, state of mind is important. And when you got state of mind right and you got support from your family and you're able to lead a large organization like Kroger, Vice President of Operations, I'm leading a team of 22,000 employees. And then I'm president of the fraternity leading this great organization. The reason I'm able to do that is because I have the balance. But more importantly, I have the support of your phrase, Team Cristal. That makes it work.
Good stuff. So now I've shared with you some characteristics that I see consistent. What is the one element or characteristic of Micheal Cristal that is symbolic of his commitment to Phi Beta Sigma fraternity?
You know, Steve, great question. I think I've said that a few times.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, it appears you are. I've been around for a while. It's 36 years for me. I even said this when I was running for the office. For the most part, I felt like brothers knew me. I've been on the national stage for a long time. But if I had to say, you know, what would be some traits that would be symbolic, I would say inclusive and trusted. You know, I think the membership, particularly the membership, is being objective. I think they will see that their international president has shown the ability to work with anybody. I've worked with people who supported me, and I've worked with people who haven't supported me. And the common denominator on all of it is, if you're willing and have the desire to advance the mission of Sigma, I say, come on. Because to me, as I even talked about my experience with Antonio, if you're willing to minimize yourself and maximize the organization, I'm right there with you. The best example, some of the past presidents, I kind of laugh about this now. You know, a lot of the past presidents I worked with as I was kind of growing in my career. You heard me talk about working with President Griffin we used to call him the executive assistant back then. We call him chief of staff now. I was his chief of staff. Peter Adams, I served on the board with him. Jimmy Hammock, I served in his administration as the director of conferences and logistics. But when I announced my candidacy for president, the vast majority of the past presidents didn't support me. To be quite frank, I only had 2 of them who supported me. But once I was elected, one of the first meetings I had was with the past president. Once I kind of got up and going in the administration, I asked Jimmy Hammock to chair our Impact One capital campaign. You heard me talk about working collaboratively with Peter on restructuring our foundation. Since I've been in office, I know I've had at least 3 meetings. I had a meeting at the conclave. I've had 2 conference calls with the past presidents, engaging with them on what we're doing and sharing with them how we could work collaboratively. You heard me talk about inviting them to our retreat last year. I've extended an invitation for them to come this year. And so I've never concerned myself with how you felt about me. I never have. And I think part of it is none of this is about me. I think the good Lord just put this on my spirit, and that is, I don't really care about being president. And I don't want the membership to hear the wrong thing. I love the role. I love the desire to work in collaboration with the general board and with the chapters and the regions. But that has never been my life ambition. My world is not defined by being president of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. My world is defined with my family. I love my career. Not too many people can say that. I love my career. I look forward to going to work every morning. I'm excited about going to work, to be very honest with you. And so what I try to do is bring the skill sets that I've been blessed to learn from Kroger. How do I bring those to the fraternity? And if I'm lucky or fortunate to provide some of that to the organization, I see that as a win. I don't see the desire for Micheal being number 35 and I'm on the wall downstairs and people are standing up. That doesn't excite me. And just one last color behind that, with respect, that was my life before I became president. I'm vice president of a major corporation. There's not but 16 companies bigger than ours. And so my experience when I walk in a store, Mr. Cristal is here. Not Micheal, Mr. Cristal is here. And so I get that. So I'm not coming to Sigma for that. I'm coming to Sigma because, man, I can't imagine a 104-year-old organization that doesn't have an endowment. How can we even imagine our future and we don't have that? And if I could provide some leadership and some vision around that we could have that afterwards, that's a good thing. And any of the issues that we're talking about. So that's what drives me. That's what kind of motivates me. And that's why I said all I ever wanted to do, I just want to be a credit to the organization. I didn't want to be president. It just kind of happened for me.
Well, I think that speaks volume to your characteristics and your character. So, is there any closing remarks or comments or information you want to share with our membership?
So, one of the things I want to do first, Steve, as well, thank you for the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. Certainly, I want to thank the International General Board for the great support they've given as we've looked at this first year. Certainly want to thank the International Headquarters staff for the great work that you provide. But more importantly, I certainly want to thank our members and our chapters for your support. You know, when you think about Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, you and I both believe this is the greatest fraternity on God's green earth. And we believe it's the greatest fraternity on God's green earth because we understand what our values are. We've talked a lot about that. And for me, when I think about the vision that we're attempting to create, this brotherhood of conscious men actually serving our communities, I'm really reminded of a quote from Brother A.M. Walker. And, you know, Brother Walker said, "I believe in all that Phi Beta Sigma represents, and I will herald and defend it, even against the world." I remember that as a collegiate. I remember talking to Harwood, one of my best friends. Harwood was my line brother. And I always reflected on the last part of that quote, and that was, even against the world. I mean, that's some real love. That's some serious love. And when I think about that, I think about, how am I, as a member, not as president, how am I as a member heralding and defending Phi Beta Sigma on a consistent basis? You know, one of the things that I think about in my career, and now I'm talking about my career in Sigma, is whatever I'm in, I'm all in. My family, I've been married to my wife 31 years. I'm all in. My career, I've been working for the same company for 32 years. I'm all in. Phi Beta Sigma, I've been a member, as I said, 36 years. I'm all in. And when I think about our fraternity, and when I think about how do we advance our fraternity, I want to just share some of the thoughts and experiences. You know, I really think it's important that brothers have the opportunity to express themselves, because I think it's important. But I could never imagine going to work and speaking negatively about Kroger. I just could never imagine that. I could never imagine going outside and speaking negatively about my wife, about my children. And I could never imagine speaking negatively about this fraternity. Now, that doesn't mean that my wife and I haven't had disagreements. Of course we have. It doesn't mean I haven't had a level of disappointment with my children or vice versa. Of course. But I could never imagine negatively saying to you, "Steve, man, Marty, boy, she gets on my last nerves." I could never imagine doing that. And so when I witness brothers expressing sometimes really not so positive comments about their fraternity, not my fraternity, their fraternity, and I see it written in sometime a public forum, I often think it's probably written not because that's what they believe. It's just their way of expressing their passion. It's their way of them saying, man, my fraternity is not standing up to what I believe it should be standing up to. But here's what I would just caution you on as you think about that or you express that. I would just ask that you really refrain from doing that, because it's probably a collegiate brother who's reading that. And that collegiate brother is potentially getting jaded by that. I want you to think about that could be a recent initiated alumni brother who's passionate about the fraternity, who has this great family, has this great career, and he's had this great vision of the fraternity, and then he's seeing this. And so it's creating maybe a negative experience for him. My ask of you, if you're having that level of frustration, be reminded where the best ideas come from. Be reminded where the greatest impact comes from. And the best ideas and the greatest impact almost always come from our local arena. If you want to really drive the change that you're not seeing nationally, drive that change within your local chapter. Effectuate that change that you're wanting to see. Because I've always believed the greatest change, the best change, it doesn't happen at the national level. The best change, the most impactful change, it happens in your local chapter. And so I would ask, as you think about that, if you can, refrain from it. Think about the people who might read what you're writing. Think about the public arena that you're placing it in. And then think about the opportunity to drive that passion in another place in the best opportunity. And then I close with this, Steve. I'm so thankful for you blessing me with the opportunity to be your international president. I'm so thankful for the work that we have done this past year. But here's what I know. I know that my to-do list is longer than my completed list. And because my to-do list is longer than my completed list, I know that there's so much more work for us to do. And so as we celebrate the work that we've achieved during year one, I look forward to you continuing going on this journey with me as we go into year two. Again, thank you for everything you've done to advance the brand of Sigma on your college campus, for advancing the brand of Sigma within your community, and I look forward to partnering with you as we go forward. Thank you, and may God bless Phi Beta Sigma fraternity.